Welcome to our video on productivity bargaining across Europe, a comparative analysis. This video presents the findings from a pan-European study entitled Bargaining for Productivity, co-funded by the European Commission, DG Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion, and coordinated by ADAPT Italy. My name is Laura William.
My name is Ilke Veersma.
And we're from the University of Greenwich.
So, the outline of this presentation will be, first of all, the question, is there a productivity problem in Europe, and what is it about? Next question is, how can this be related to collective bargaining, employment relations in a broader sense, and what makes up the productivity puzzle? Next, we will look at how it is different countries that we look at, and the productivity performance is different, as we will show, across the different countries. And next, we will look at the policies and also at the impact of collective bargaining in each country. The countries we looked at are Italy, Poland, Spain, Germany, Netherlands, and the UK. Well, the issue of productivity has become a problem across Europe. Slow productivity growth, and this has especially become more problematic after the financial recession in 2007-2008. But looking into productivity, there are various factors contributing, like technology, investment in R&D, and then of course labor productivity and working hours. The question you could summarize it about labor productivity is about, is it working long hours or working smart? And this raises the question of whether it's about long-term productivity or short-term. There may be long-term or short-term effects. And next, there are different impacts at various levels, like nationally, sectorally, and organizationally. So, how is productivity related to collective bargaining, first of all? Looking at these figures, it becomes clear that there are differences across the different countries. And the difference in terms of collective bargaining have to do, first of all, with the levels of union density. Union density is quite low and is decreasing. The numbers of union members is decreasing across Europe. But then looking at coverage rate, it's about the impact of collective agreements on the individual plans and jobs involved. It's very different across Europe. Netherlands, Spain, Italy have a high coverage rate. Germany somewhat lower, but still pretty high. And the UK and Poland stand out as different levels of coverage rate. This means that there's less impact of collective agreements at the job level, and it's more market oriented. We come to that later, and we will explain more about it. Last, about this slide, there's also a difference in terms of the membership rate of employers associations. This is pretty high in the Netherlands, 85%. Spain is also quite high. Germany, somewhat lower. And again, UK and Poland stand out as very low membership rate of employers. Now, looking at how the different countries perform in terms of productivity, there are two countries that stand out, Germany and the Netherlands, with a high level of productivity. There are countries in the middle, UK, Italy, and Spain. And there's a low-level performer, Poland, which has to do with the position of the country breaking up from the Soviet Union in 1989. These are the differences, but then there are also changes. When we look at the last decades, there have been changes, and Poland is a transitional economy. We'll explain more about that, but they have a increasing level of productivity, whereas there are mid-level performance with having a medium level of productivity growth, the Netherlands, Germany, and Spain. And the two countries lagging behind, you could say, are Italy and the UK. Now, it's not only about collective bargaining, We also looked at other aspects of pay and performance at the company level, and skilling, employee voice, and equality and diversity as very important aspects of employment relations at the organizational level. That's something apart from this presentation, but it has a lot of an impact. And wages and working hours are also an indication of the sustainability of the economy. When we look at those elements of employment conditions, there are three groups of countries again. Some countries have a high level of sustainability, lower working hours with moderate wages and higher productivity, Germany and the Netherlands. Medium level of sustainability, Italy, Spain and the UK. The UK, where there was, until recently also, higher wages, wage development, stronger wage growth compared to the productivity. And low level of sustainability with low levels of productivity, with long working hours, Poland.
So exploring the similarities and differences in collective bargaining in these 6 countries now. So Poland and the UK stand out as liberal market economies and also following the market-orientated model of labour regulation by Boyer. In these economies, you find that they have a high level of liberalisation of markets. There is a neoliberal tradition with a dominance of human resource management and firm level procedures. There's not a great level of unionisation and collective bargaining is very scant. Poland and the UK stand in comparison to Italy and Spain. Italy and Spain are mixed market economies and follow the meso-corporatist model of labour regulation proposed by Boyer. So what happens in these economies is you have regulation at different levels, including statutory regulation, multi-employer agreements at national industry and levels with firm level bargaining and human resource management. There is, however, despite the strong horizontal integration of bargaining, there is weaker level of vertical integration, and this is down to what's agreed at the core very infrequently being filtered out to the periphery. Then the third categorisation we have is Germany and the Netherlands. These are traditional coordinated market economies and also a meso-corporatist model of labour regulation. In these firms, you see there's cooperation at sectoral and firm level, which often leads to integrative bargaining outcomes. If we look now at the national peculiarities and sectoral influences in each country, we're going to start by examining Poland. As we've already stated, Poland is a transition economy, and as a result of this, it's catching up since the fall of communism in the late 1980s. We've seen a large amount of investment being attracted into Poland from Western economies, and these have been attracted by the low level of wages. There's also been intensive technology transfer in the manufacturing sector. All these influences have led to a boom in productivity in Poland, and while it is still below the other countries that we're analysing, it does show the largest amount of growth since the 1980s. If we look now briefly at the UK has what we see as a low road to productivity. There's a dominance of the financialisation agenda, with a focus on lowering unit cost and short-term financial targets. In the UK, there is an over-reliance on marginalised jobs and an increase of use in information computer technology, which is not reflected in the productivity figures. Moving on to explore Italy. Italy has seen labour productivity stagnation since the mid-1990s, and this is partly attributed to low levels of skills. And this is because there's low level of participation in tertiary education across Italy. There's been a lack of investment in research and development and related investment in innovation and skills. So we can really see the skills agenda coming out as quite dominant in Italy. In Spain, there's been strong counter-cyclical character in their productivity developments. Spain is experiencing difficulties in productivity levels due to their reliance on flexible labour to adjust to rigidities in the labour market. Despite this flexible labour dominance, there are some signs of recovery in the Spanish productivity figures due to an increase in export figures. Turning to explore Germany, the overall trend since the 1990s is positive. Germany is known for its quality production, and its labour market is characterised by diversified quality production. There are high levels of involvement of social partners with policy making and involvement of employee representatives at company level, often through works councils. There's also strong wage moderation compared with productivity in Germany. So we can see quite a positive picture of productivity in Germany overall. In the Netherlands, we have the Wassenaar Agreement in the 1980s. This agreement focused on reducing working hours, wages, and retaining profits. As a result of the success of this agreement, the Netherlands became known as one of the European tigers. However, there is a strong reliance on the gig economy in the Netherlands, which could have problems for future generations. Despite these problems, there is strong worker participation at company level. This slide here summarises the different views of labour policies and labour productivity and their ineffectiveness or effectiveness in the various countries. We can see in the three columns we examine the public policies, the social partners' views, and then whether they are effective overall. Some headlines I'll briefly point out from this slide. We can see that in Italy, productivity is high on the government agenda, especially through Industry 4.0. It's also very high on the social partners agenda. They pay a lot of attention to labour productivity and as an input, and fortunately a general ineffectiveness with few exceptions. If we compare this to the UK, historically public policy has paid much more attention to productivity in the UK. However, today there's not much of a coordinated strategy. The social partners view labour productivity policies quite negatively, believing that they don't have enough bite to prove efficient in improving productivity, and generally the outcome is ineffective. So what are the views and strategies of social partners in relation to labour productivity? For Poland, productivity is not a concern for social partners, although there is some place for tripartite dialogue. In Germany, unions are combining productivity with decent work, co-determination and training, pointing to a high road of productivity. In the Netherlands, the European tiger, we see that social partners believe high road productivity can be achieved through performance-related pay, flexible working hours, training and cooperative industrial relations, often resulting in integrative bargaining. In the UK, the government released a productivity plan, but the social partners are sceptical about its feasibility and believe that it doesn't go far enough to address the productivity problem in the UK. Italy, as we've already discussed, productivity is high on the agenda for social partners and is a relevant variable with decentralised collective bargaining. In Spain, however, there's a lack of impact of national agreements.
Summarizes more or less what has been told before. Collective bargaining has an impact on labour productivity, but the way it has been addressed, or it is addressed in different countries, is different. Again, Germany, there are national collective agreements. The Netherlands, it's not as such directed as a target for collective agreements. And Poland, with a fragmented system of industrial relations, employment relations, it's not being addressed as such. In Spain, there are some national collective agreements that address productivity, and in the UK, it's not the main topic or objective of collective bargaining. We then looked at how this works out in terms of high road to productivity or a low road to productivity, although it must be said there's most likely in many sectors, the sectors we looked up on, there is a combination to be found. One could say there's still a segmentation of labour and segmentation of the labour market in terms of a core part of the labour market and a periphery, especially when you look at for example, the automotive industry or retail industry and others. In Germany, there is more widespread attention for productivity at firm level. In Italy, it can be found at some firm level agreements, but there's more use of pirate national collective agreements in labor intensive sectors, which means intensification of labor is the main target. Netherlands is more in capital intensive sectors, but there's also a low road in terms of some sectors being more focused on labor intensification rather than raising productivity through skilling. Poland is also high road to productivity is also rare, and it's more widespread experiences with HRM at the organizational level. Spain, some firm level agreements, especially within big companies, but there's also a low road to productivity in labor intensive sectors and especially the small and medium sized enterprises. In the UK, high road to productivity, as said before, it's more in the core of the labor market, and in some companies, the bigger companies, and there's also a low road to productivity where HRM practices are more about labor cost and lowering labor costs. The overall conclusion of this project is there are different levels of productivity between countries, various levels of coordination within the labor market with low coverage of collective agreements in some countries, whereas other countries having a higher coverage and therefore also having more of an impact on productivity. Let's say it's through the social dialogue between social partners that productivity is more directly addressed in the coordinated market economy. This points to varieties of capitalism, the difference between a coordinated market economy and a liberal market economy is very relevant in this respect, and also models of regulation can play a role in the national variation of productivity. Regulation in terms of regulation of working conditions, protection of labor, and security of a job. Last but not least, there are different perspectives on productivity that differ upon the different positions of the national institutions and the role that national institutions play. Collective bargaining is one, but there are many more that are directly addressing issues of skilling of labor, having voice, and all the other elements that we looked at organizational level. Thank you for your attention.